try to avoid busy roads, but sometimes the habitat is just too good. I do have a few boxes on 11 and a few on 11B away from the traffic. So hopefully when they fly out, they're going to fly away from the road, and once they get away from the road, then they're fine. That's the plan anyhow. It doesn't always hold true, but that's our plan. We started this project back in 2001. We built 116 Kestrel boxes, and we got them out by 2002. And our first year we only banded like 17 chicks. And the reason why we started this project was back in 2000 I noticed that there was a pair of kestrels nesting in a fence post only 4 feet off the ground, which made them very susceptible to predators. And it got me thinking that the reason why they were nesting so low was they had no available nest cavities. And kestrels nest in the trees, in the cavities. And if they have no nest cavities, then they're going to have problems. And as it is, kestrels in the Northeast are already having problems. Their populations are starting to decrease. And they figured it's probably because of habitat loss, lack of cavities, and the increase of the Cooper's hawk, because Cooper's hawk eats birds, and part of what they eat are kestrels. So because of that, the kestrel population in the Northeast has been decreasing. And so we started this project thinking that we would increase the population. And when we started this population, I counted 51 kestrels on the study area. Last year, on the 8th year, we counted 297. And this year, we're already over 260 something. So closer to 270. So our population's definitely increased, and the reason why is because of nest box availability. They have places to nest, and if they have places to nest, they're going to nest. And kestrels are great to have around because kestrels are insect eaters. They eat things like grasshoppers, June bugs, all kinds of insects, which are nice to get rid of if you're a farmer. And then, if the mouse population is high, their second main prey item is mice, like voles. And their third prey item, if the mice population is high, are birds. And they'll eat things like starlings and house finches, but they'll also eat things like chickadees and things that are a little bit more higher on people's list of wanting to have around. But generally it's mice and it's insects that they eat, which is why it's nice to have kestrels around. Plus they're a top predator in the ecosystem, which tells us if something's going on with the environment. If they're having problems, it gives us signals that maybe we're having problems. And each bird gets its own band, and the band is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service band, and it has its own unique number. And with that number, we can trace these birds wherever they go. If you were to find a bird on the side of the road that's dead or injured, obviously the injured ones, you would contact your local DEC and find out the name of a local wildlife rehabilitator to get the bird to. If you were to find a dead one on the side of the road, especially if it's banded, you should take that band number, that band information, and with that information, again, I would contact either the New York State DEC, or a better thing to do is to get on the web and look up the U.S. Wildlife Service Bird Banding Lab. And on their webpage, they tell you how to report if you find a banded bird. And really, the people such as myself who are out there spending hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, and hundreds of dollars of our own money, we really rely on people who find those band numbers to report them, because that's where we learn. That's a huge wealth of information that if somebody were to report, then what I would do is contact that person. We'd share information. I'd tell them about the history of the bird before they found it, and then they can fill in part of the puzzle of the bird's history by telling me the bits and pieces of the bird that they know from their encounter. And the more we can fit together bits and pieces of information, the more we're going to learn about these birds, and the better we can help the birds. And we're starting to find out that when they migrate, when they head south for the winter, they go on the west side of the Adirondacks, and when they come north for the summer, they come on the east side of the Adirondacks. So we're starting to figure out flight patterns. And here's a female. You can see the brown wings. Oh. And these guys are about 2 weeks old.
No kidding.
And we just put a band on them to keep track of them. And there's 5 of them. I just put 3 in the nest box back already.
Oh.
But aren't they cool?
Yeah.
Since this project began, I've now banded over 800 chicks on this project. So we just hit the 800 mark this year. We're headed toward Brookdale. There's a box on the Porter Lynch Road. There's a brand new box. I just put that one up yesterday. That's what they look like when they're brand spanking new. But sometimes, like I say, sometimes it takes a couple years for them to get used to the boxes, because they are very, we use white pine and it's very bright wood, and it takes a while to weather, which is why I put them out now, so by next year it would have weathered a bit. Yeah. When I originally started putting them up, I was putting them up on trees, but with trees they tend to fall down more, or the tree falls down. Back at that last spot I was stopping at, there used to be a box there, but the whole tree fell down. So then I shifted to poles. Back in the day, the power companies didn't like you putting on boxes because they had to climb up with climbing spurs. But nowadays they use the cherry pickers, and because of that they don't need to climb up on the poles anymore. So because of that, we can put them up there. And I was still kind of dubious, except for you look around, there's all kinds of posted signs and small bird boxes attached to these things. And I got a hold of a friend of mine who works for a phone company, Nickelville phone company, and he said, "Oh no, go right ahead. We don't climb the poles anymore." So because of that, I thought, all right. So I've been putting them up. So through the 9 years, the Kestrel box itself on this study has been evolving and changing. And I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put an extender board in front of the hole to make that, instead of an inch thick, make it 2 inches thick. So a raccoon can't just reach in. And maybe a Cooper's hawk can't reach in either, because it'd be a little bit thicker and they won't be able to reach in as easy. And that, I think, is going to be the next part of the evolution. Might be happening this year with the boxes I got, but I don't like changing the boxes too quickly, because if I do, it may scare kestrels off, because it's a new and totally different and untested thing. And when you do it, you got to do it slowly over time. If you do it over time and they adjust to it, then you can pick up the pace a little. But if you do it too quickly and you find out, hey, this doesn't work. When I was in Wisconsin, the Hammerstroms project, Fran had 50 boxes out in central Wisconsin on the Buena Vista Marsh, and we twice a summer we checked the nest boxes, and we banded the chicks and we banded the adults, and it was pretty much the precursor of this project. So when Fran and Hammy went to Mexico and Texas to work on the Harris Hawks, and then into Mexico to work on the Osprey, a friend of mine and I, we got the money, we got the funds to build 50 brand new boxes. Unfortunately, they stood out like a sore thumb because white pine, when it's brand new, stands out. And then the second thing was we did a different style than Fran was used to. And because of that, Fran was adamant when she came back and she saw all the boxes up. She was mortified that we switched all of her boxes and changed them to this because she felt that kestrels, and I agree with her now that I've done this project, don't handle change readily. It took 2 or 3 years to establish a population with the boxes that were there when we put them out, and it takes a while. So when she came back, she had us take down all 50 boxes and put up all of her old boxes, 90% of which were pretty much trash, and we had to rebuild. And we put them all back up in the span of less than a month before the kestrels were back. And brand new boxes do have to be out. The latest we put boxes out is like March 31st, because by the 1st of April, kestrels are in the area and they are looking for nesting habitat, nesting cavities. So I make it a rule that I have my boxes out no later than the 31st of March, and then from March 31st through June 24th, we don't go into those boxes at all. If we see activity, we kind of keep track of where it is, but we don't go in there because we do not want to cause desertions. We don't want to scare birds off. Our whole purpose of the study is to benefit the kestrel population and not hurt it.
So having nest boxes put up includes more roosting and more nesting areas for kestrels because they like to nest in cavities.
And we mentioned my study area, 186, almost 187,000 acres. It runs 25 miles east to west, 20 miles north to south. Well, my southernmost border is actually, I have one nest box that's actually in the Adirondack State Park. And my northern boxes are probably only about 3 or 4 miles, maybe at the most 5 miles from the St. Lawrence River, because most of my boxes are either in the foothills of the Adirondacks or in the St. Lawrence River Valley. And I'm only 4 or 5 miles from Canada, which is very, very nice. And my boxes scoot right along the edge of the Akwesasne Mohawk reservation. So, and I kind of avoided putting boxes there because as it is, I deal with, I have to deal with the paperwork through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the New York State DEC, and I didn't want to add another layer of bureaucracy in dealing with the environmental people at the Mohawk reservations. And I would say 70 to 80% of my study area is Brazier Falls Central High School School District, because that is the school district that I teach at, and students from the high school work there. But we also slide over into the Potsdam School District, and we slide over to the Salmon River School District and Brushton-Moira School District and parts of St. Regis Falls School District and even Parrishville School District. So we kind of are encompassing quite a large area, but most of it is within the school district that I teach at. That way the kids who work on the project have more of a feel of ownership. The more that they feel that these birds are theirs, the more protective they are, and the more concerned they're going to be, and the more they're going to want to learn about them. And you try and contact as many landowners as you can when, you know, as you're going in, if you hear that the land's changed hands. Like I said, I contacted all the landowners originally before I put boxes up, because I only put boxes up if I had permission. Is that a kestrel? Yep, there's a kestrel right just flew into the tree, I think. All right, well, we'll have to see if we got a bull in here or not. Somebody told me they didn't have any bulls in here, but the person who told me that doesn't live here. Is if you walk into the field, it will be the one that gets up and starts walking at you. At least if it's breeding season for cows. Yeah. Because the bull doesn't want you in its habitat or in its territory. And they'll all be lying down and it'll get up and it'll walk our way. And it won't look happy. So we'll give them a second and we'll find out if a bull shows up. If not, we'll go take a look at what we got in there. This one just has an egg. Used to have chicks. That's what happens every so often. You get nests that fail. But here's what an egg looks like. That's a kestrel egg. And they usually lay 4 to 5, sometimes 6 of them. And sometimes as few as 2 or 3. Usually it's 4 or 5 around here. And then what happens if you only have 2 or 3 chicks that fledge? The other ones die. Like I said, this one used to have chicks in it, and I don't know what happened to the chicks. But this egg is probably bad because it didn't hatch, but the chicks did, which tells me this one's probably a bad egg. I'm gonna put it back in, you never know. And at that point I need only 2 or 3 more to get to 150, and I'm stalling out again. I may not get there again this year. So we got varying habitat. The woods, the brushy stuff, anything like that, kestrels just do not like. They like the open fields, they like this the meadows, that type of stuff are great for them. They even have kestrels nesting in New York City. I don't know where the heck they're hunting. Must be like around the edge of, surrounding the edge of Central Park, that area. There sounds like a decent population in New York City too, which is kind of cool. And I'm always looking at habitat. Like this habitat here looks nice, but then you got to think kestrels like the open fields, and they like the cavities for nesting in. But then the other things they need perches to hunt from. So if they don't have perches, it's worthless. And then the other thing is if the farmer is like constantly cutting the grass down to where there's no leaf litter, then you're not going to have any prey in there. So there's certain things you got to look for that make decent kestrel habitat. Occasionally we'll find a family of kestrels that something's happened to their parents. Either the parents got killed by a car or a predator, but obviously the parents are definitely gone. And occasionally I'll even get rehabilitators who will call me and they'll say, hey, we got these baby birds, these baby kestrels, and we need a home for them. And what we'll do is we'll take those young kestrels and we will find a nest for them of kestrels of the same age. Because again, if you put kestrels in boxes with chicks that are either bigger or smaller than them, they don't do well because the bigger kestrels chicks will get all the food and they'll bully the younger kestrels, and they'll actually kill and eat the younger kestrels. So what we do is, because I have 150 kestrel boxes out, we have a lot of potential of finding a bird that are the right size and age. And on numerous occasions, rehabilitators have contacted me saying, hey, we have these birds to place. Or we have found a few times where we found chicks that something happened to their parents. And what we do is we'll find a nest with the right age chicks and we'll foster them. And the nice thing with birds of prey is they don't know how to count. And birds, contrary to the old wives' tale, most birds do not have a sense of smell. So they won't smell our scent on them because they just can't smell. And because of that, they'll readily adopt the chicks. And if we end up putting the chicks in a nest box that has a large number of chicks to begin with, we will go in on a regular basis and augment their diet with dropping off an extra mouse here, an extra mouse there, and helping Mama and Papa out. One year we had a nest box and we affectionately called the mother Little Mama, because I went up and I looked inside the box and here was this very emaciated you could tell that the female, she was starving to death and her chicks had no energy. And you really wondered what the heck is going on and where's Papa? And what we did was we started dropping food off to her. And over the span of the next week, I would drop off 2 or 3 mice. And the first day I dropped off 3 mice, and the next day I went back to drop off more. And Mama was literally tearing the mouse apart and feeding her chicks. She turned and she looked straight up at me, and then she went back to feeding her chicks. And over the span of a week, we watched her regain her strength. Pretty soon she was actually sitting outside of the box, and pretty soon she was hunting on her own, and we were watching her catch food and bring them to the chicks. And we actually kept continuing to feed the chicks along with her. And when it came time to band the chicks, we went back and we banded all of her chicks. They were nice and fat and ready to go. And we kept an eye on them until they fledged. And all of her chicks left the box, were free flying, and were to the point where we would count them on a regular basis sitting on the telephone lines. They had enough strength to fly, get up on the telephone lines, and we were watching them hunt grasshoppers. And it's just one of the many, many, many success stories that we have of this project. Okay, for road trapping, we use a balsha tree, or as we raptor biologists call it, a BC. And BCs have been around for decades. The Arabs used to use them. They'd make it out of reeds and tie horsehairs to it. We use a metal one made out of hardware cloth with fishing line slip knot nooses attached to it. And we're dropping it out here to see if we can catch a red tail, not a kestrel, but at the same time it'll show you the whole process at which we catch these things. So let's see if she stays. Oh, stay. Okay, the trap is rare. She stayed. All right, it's ideal setup right there. Oh, and she's about ready to go. With the BC, what we do is, or the balsha tree, as we're driving down the road, we can do it a couple different ways. If we got adult kestrels at a nest that we haven't caught in the box, we'll set the BCs out near the box. And then when the kestrels come, the adults come, they'll see the prey species, and we bait our traps with mice. And they'll see the mice and they'll think, all right, we're gonna go down and grab it. And they'll go down to grab the mice and they'll foot at it, move their feet around. And as they do, they get their feet tangled up in the slip knot nooses. And once they do, the trap itself is weighted with rebar so they can't carry it. And then we quickly run over and we subdue the bird. We get its feet so it can't hurt us, and we cover its head. And once we cover its head, it relaxes. And then we unhook its feet and we put it in the can, and then we band and process the bird. If we're driving down the road and we happen to see a kestrel on the side of the road, not near a nest box, what we can do is we'll take the same trap and we'll slow down and we'll toss it out onto the edge of the road. And the traps are built kind of like a sled. So first of all, we're going to aim for the grass so it's got a soft landing. But as they hit, they slide, because they're bottom heavy, they slide and the mouse just hangs on. He doesn't even have to hang on. He can just sit there because the thing comes to a stop like a sled. And if the kestrel holds still, it'll come to a stop directly in front of the kestrel. And we just keep driving, and the bird watches us, then it turns back, and lo and behold, right in front of it is food. With kestrels, you watch, they when they're really interested, their heads bobbing and their tails bobbing, and little by little they start leaning, and then they completely just launch themselves after the bird, or after the prey, which in this case is a mouse. We use as prey mice, starlings, there it goes, house sparrows, and then on occasion, for bigger birds, we'll use pigeons. All three birds are introduced species, and because they're introduced, they're not protected, and we try and take as good care of our prey species as we can, because we don't want to be horrible, mean, cruel to the animals. But officially, again, we banded 175 kestrel chicks this year. So our grand total for kestrel chicks banded on the project is 745 kestrel chicks since 2002. When you add in all the adults that we've banded, and just total number of kestrels banded on the project, we're well above 800 at this point. We're something like 830 kestrels on the project. So the project has produced a ton of birds, a ton of kestrels. And out of those kestrels, we've been finding, you know, as I mentioned before, all the different places where they're going to, and how long they're living and where they're migrating to. And what's really neat about when you put a band on a bird, they're no longer this brown feathered streak. They become individuals to us. And each bird that you put a band on, you never know. It's like a mystery. You may hear from these birds again, you may not. The majority of the birds that we band, we never hear from again. But, you know, if every year we hear from 1 or 2 birds over the span of 5, 10, 15, I'm hoping to do this project for at least 20, 25, 30 years, little by little by little, we're starting to fill in the questions, you know, fill in the pieces of the puzzle, figure out what's going on with our birds, and you know, how the population is doing and what can we do to further benefit the population. I started Adirondack Raptors for multiple reasons. One is to work with educating people about birds of prey. So I actually bring live birds of prey, my barn owl, my great horned owl, my Harris hawks, into lodges and resorts and places like that, camps, state parks, retirement homes, high schools, elementary schools, and we present to people about birds of prey. We teach them about birds of prey. I fly my birds around. I tell them about kestrels, and I tell them about why it's important that we take care of, you know, why it's important to have kestrels, number one, and why we're taking care of them, and again, what they can do. We also, with Adirondack Raptors, we bring people out and watch birds of prey in their natural environment. People come out when I'm banding birds of prey, and they help with the banding process. I have people constantly coming out. I have a revolving door of people coming out and helping us when we're doing the Kestrel project. I've had people help on the Kestrel project who were from North Carolina, Vermont, different parts of New York, Canada. So I got people from all over the place, Atlanta, Georgia, that are always coming and helping. New people from New Hampshire are coming, and part of it is we use it as a tool to educate the people, and obviously we use it as a tool to help the kestrels. And we are constantly being asked by people if they can come out, and people are more than welcome to come out with us and help us work with the kestrels and learn about the kestrels. People come and they stay at my house and come out for a day or a weekend, or people will just come for the day if they're within driving distance, and I encourage that because it's a way for them to learn about the birds, and it's a way for, you know, me to maybe get a little free help. Somebody can hold the kestrel while I'm banding it, that type of thing, so people can get to experience a very unique and magical, wondrous opportunity of a lifetime.